This week, we're talking about the idea of self-reliance in the past and now. Can someone please remind us what self-reliance is?
Yes. Self-reliance means that you do things for yourself. You don't depend on other people for help.
Good. So, yesterday, we talked about the experiences of explorers in the past. These people went out to explore new places. They didn't know what they were going to find, and they had no way to communicate with their homes or to ask for help. We read about the explorers Christopher Columbus and Sir Francis Drake. You remember that Drake was the first Englishman to sail around the world. Now, for homework, you did some research on two modern men who sailed around the world alone, Zach Sunderland and Teddy Seymour. What did you learn about them?
Well, I've read the blog by Zach Sunderland. He's the youngest American ever to sail around the world alone. He was only 17 years old. He started and ended his voyage in California. During his trip, he was alone on the boat at all times, and he didn't make any stops on land. He definitely had to be self-reliant. Like, when something broke on the boat, he had to repair it. When there were storms, he had to know what to do. His life depended on it.
I've read his blog too, and I agree that it's a good example of self-reliance. But the voyages of Columbus and other explorers were much more dangerous.
How was Zach's voyage safer?
Well, just think. Zach was alone on the boat, but he had a lot of technology with him, like SATCOM, which is a satellite communication system. He communicated with people all over the world every day. He had a GPS system, so he always knew where he was. And he received reports about the weather. Don't get me wrong. It was still a very dangerous and difficult thing to do.
And what about Teddy Seymour?
Well, in some ways, his trip was more similar to those of the early explorers. Teddy Seymour made his voyage in 1986. Even in 1986, most small boats didn't have good communications systems. Things like SATCOM and GPS are recent inventions. Teddy had to learn to use the stars to guide his trip. The only technology he had was a radio direction finder. He didn't have any way to communicate with people on shore. Of course, he did make some stops on his trip, and his trip was longer. He returned to the United States in June of 1987.
So, what do you think? Was Teddy Seymour more self-reliant than Zach Sunderland? Are people today less self-reliant than in the past?